Okay. When I received the call from Tom in the summer of 2019, asking me if I'd consider running, unopposed, for president of AAFP, I was completely surprised and elated. AAFP is the organization in which I grew up. It has been my intellectual and professional home since I first began attending the conference in 2004 as a second-year doctoral student. I gave my first conference presentation, shaking behind the podium, with several of my academic heroes in the audience. Over the years, I've made strong personal and professional connections through AAFP, and I count several of our members among my closest friends and colleagues. So yeah, I was shocked but thrilled. This organization has given me so much, and I was and I remain eager to give back. Of course, as one does, I began thinking about what I would talk about in my presidential address. I would talk about the importance of research with consequence, applied research intended to foster change and continuous improvement in education policy and practice, the importance of working together with policymakers and practitioners to do this kind of research, so that we are using our knowledge and skills to address the real-life, real-time questions and needs of the people who are devoting their lives to improving kids' and adults' education and long-term outcomes. This is the work for which AAFP is known. But that was summer of 2019, and the world has changed in the last 3 years. And so all the research, the work we all do, must go on and has go on, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. I'm going to talk about something different than I'd planned. Oops, that's not supposed to happen. The last few years have been tough, on everyone, and on some more than others. I'm generally a silver linings kind of person, but even the most starry-eyed optimists among us haven't been able to see the rainbows through the clouds every day, or even most days lately. Not to state the obvious, but we've been living through a global pandemic for the last 2 years. Over 6 million people have died from COVID-19, nearly 1 million in the US alone. Countless others have suffered long-term consequences of the disease, including debilitating symptoms of long COVID, economic challenges, struggles with mental and social health, and something that many of our own members have documented, massive impacts on the academic, socio-emotional, and mental health of our students and educators. And over this same time, we have seen the brutal murder of George Floyd, of Ahmaud Arbery, of Breonna Taylor, of Daunte Wright, and countless other racially motivated killings, alongside countless examples of racism inherent in much of our society. And we've experienced, and some of you have even contributed to and led, an uprising, a demand for racial justice and social justice. As a broader society, we have begun, far too late, to recognize what our BIPOC friends and colleagues have long known, that we are living through a second, longer-standing pandemic that has led to the deaths and destructions of lives and families. And contributing to my difficulty with finding a silver lining, we're watching a war play out. And while Russia and Ukraine are taking center stage, there are other international atrocities occurring and affecting people across the globe. All of this is exhausting. It's exhausting to think about our place in the world and our communities and how we can continue to work to improve the world around us. It is exhausting because when we think deeply about what is happening around us, many of us are stuck in an uncomfortable place, recognizing our privilege and recognizing that with privilege comes responsibility to make things even marginally better for those without or with less. But there is a silver lining. We're growing. All of this chaos, disruption, all of this discomfort we are experiencing on a daily, even hourly basis, it's giving us a chance to change, to be proactive about who we want to be, as individuals, as scholars, as educators, as policymakers. In fact, there's a long line of research that tells us that these kinds of times, the times when we are most challenged, when we are forced the most out of our comfort zones, these are the times when we grow the most. These are the times that we can become growing individuals, and that growth can be immensely productive. So while I, probably like many of you, I'm craving normalcy and comfort, and I'm tempted to retreat into my own little cocoon of familiarity so that I can stop living every minute and every day in a state of cognitive overload, I'm going to challenge each of you and us together as a community to sit in the dissonance a little bit longer. Before you all start whispering to each other that I'm totally insane, let me explain what I mean. Piaget, that psychologist many of us had to read in grad school and then promptly forgot, or I did anyway, called times like these times of disequilibrium. And he, along with a slew of other developmental and social psychologists, posited and had since proved that cognitive growth happens most during these times of disequilibrium or dissonance. especially and mostly when we are forced into new situations with lots of uncertainty. Diane Rubel, another developmental psychologist, shows that during these construction phases, we need to seek out new data, new information, so that we can make sense of where we are and what we are experiencing. And this is precisely when we can grow and learn the most. But critically, this can only happen when we do not retreat into the familiar, the comfortable, or the easy. If we live in the discomfort, we can become better. We can become different. We can expand. We can know more. What kind of dissonance am I suggesting? What more can we be expected to do? I'm going to challenge us to live our mission and vision as an organization. I'm taking this directly from our website, which I'm sure all of you visit often. But in case you haven't memorized all of it, here's some key text. This all may seem pretty run-of-the-mill, but in this statement, we're asking our AAFP community to live in some discomfort, to welcome a diversity of opinions from multiple disciplinary, methodological, and contextual backgrounds, to welcome scholars and practitioners across all experience levels whose research and practice are based in disciplines, methods, and contexts that may or may not have been traditionally valued and advanced in education policymaking. And importantly, we posit that this is what is needed to accomplish our own mission, to achieve our collective goal, to ultimately improve education policy so that all students have access to educational opportunities and are given the means to succeed in school and in their lives. In other words, we need to get out of our own comfort zones, out of our own boxes, to engage with others who are different than we are, so that we can do the kind of work for which AAFP is known, the kind of work that can change policy and practice, the kind that can inform and improve and provide evidence that policymakers and educators can use to improve the lives of kids and adults. We can accomplish this by increasing the diversity of our membership. I'm thinking of diversity broadly: racial and ethnic, sexual orientation, disciplinary, methodological, diversity of professional roles, so that we can force ourselves to be uncomfortable more often, to be challenged and think deeply more frequently. Not just because diversity on its own is important, but because it will help us to grow, to innovate, to think creatively, and to address new problems or problems that many of us have long ignored. Because we are AAFP and we're empirically focused researchers and users of research, it's important to point out that there is a large and growing trove of research that supports this assertion. Patricia Gurin, a professor emerita of psychology and women's studies at the University of Michigan, compiled and did her own research in support of UM in the lawsuits Gratz et al. And Goddard et al. Versus Bollinger. Her expert report lays out the empirical evidence showing that when people are put into situations that require some disequilibrium or dissonance because we are forced to or choose to interact with others who are not like us, with ideas that are foreign and unfamiliar, we develop deeper understandings of the world and of our role in it. In particular, social diversity, having multiple different kinds of people and ideas and thought processes, fosters civic engagement, helps grow our active and complex thinking processes that allow us to be more reflective and less reliant on the familiar, and improves engagement and motivation, as well as intellectual and academic skills. In other words, diversity of thought, disciplines, culture, background, all of these things will help us to be better thinkers, to produce better research. Diversity is a necessary component of our own efficacy and excellence. We need to be more, not less, inclusive. We need to seek out people who are not like us, welcome them into our community, and truly listen to each other. And we may not always like what we hear, but that's okay. Not everyone's going to agree with me. Some of us love the world in which we become experts in our niche areas. We go super deep and not wide. We want to come to meetings like AAFP so that we can talk to others who speak our own language. And that's okay too. We have space for that. By broadening our scope, we don't have to become less deep or less focused. And this does not mean, as some have told me they fear, that we're going to compromise on quality or on focus or on depth. We don't have to employ the same conceptual frameworks or use the same methods or start from the same lived experiences in order to enter into an evidence-based conversation with each other. We don't even have to agree with each other, but we do need to be open to others' frameworks, methods, and lived experiences. And what's important here is that my vision, my perspectives, my desires, they don't have to be yours. In fact, we're better off if my views and perspectives aren't just like yours. And if we have a community, a family, a culture, and an environment in which you feel comfortable telling me that, and I can ask you why, and we can turn to the empirical research from many disciplines, methodologies, and approaches to help educate each other. The more inclusive we are in accepting of each other's differences, the better our collective work, our collective impact will be. But how do we get there? How do we become an AAFP that is both broad scope and intense depth, that attracts and respects the best minds from all disciplines, methods, backgrounds, and lived experiences? I don't know. But again, I've turned to the research. There are many studies from business, leadership, organization, and education fields that provide insight. One that I like the most is from Damani White-Lewis, and I'm going to borrow liberally from one of his recent articles. The first step, we need to develop and communicate our vision for equity, diversity, and inclusion. We need to develop the shared vision, and then we need to communicate it to our membership and to people who might become part of our membership if we're successful. Then we need to allocate resources that both encourage and sustain activities that will foster diversity and inclusion. Third, we need to make sure that we have supportive people working on this issue within the organization, while at the same time recognizing that it's up to all of us, but especially up to those of us who have been comfortable in this space for so long, to take on the burden of the work, recognizing that we've been comfortable at the expense of some who have not. And fourth, we need to collect the data, monitor the progress, and hold ourselves accountable. We need to highlight and celebrate what is working and figure out what isn't working and why not so that we can improve it. So in that vein, I've already shared some of AAFP's mission and vision, but here's the rest. There are a lot of words up there. They're on our website, so just trust me. These are basically all about diversity and inclusion. This is already in our mission statement. This is already who we strive to be. So what about step 2? What programs are we putting into place to help us achieve this mission? We've set up multiple diversity-focused initiatives over the last few years. They're aimed at several aspects of improving diversity in the profession, including racial and ethnic diversity, diversity of backgrounds, programs, and even profession with our policymaker and practitioner work. We are working to diversify the pipeline of education policy and finance researches. This is the 3rd year of our predoctoral diversity fellowship program, through which we bring to the conference 10 individuals from diverse backgrounds who are considering doctoral degrees in related fields. This program is intended to introduce these fellows to research and demystify the profession. This year, the Pre-Doc Diversity Fellowship was generously supported by the Walton Family Foundation. We are also actively working to support and develop those who are already part of the education, finance, and policy community. Also supported by the Walton Family Foundation, and in its 9th year, we have our policymaker and practitioner travel fellowships, which have enabled a total of 90 policymakers and practitioners to come to AAFP's annual conferences over the past 9 years. This is also our 2nd year of our early career mentorship program, which is intended to support early career scholars from diverse backgrounds who are first-gen scholars and who join us from programs and universities that are typically not well represented at AAFP. And under the leadership of Dominique Baker, alongside many of her colleagues from SRI, ASH, and AERA, we have co-sponsored a series of workshops on critical quantitative methods, generously funded by the Gates Foundation. In a recent survey of community groups, and this is our 1st year of community groups, which have been wildly successful with hundreds of members from within and outside of AAFP. In a recent survey of our community group members, the overwhelming majority of respondents told us that the community groups solidified their sense of belonging in the organization, noting that AAFP is a friendly, supportive, welcoming, open, nice, and inclusive space. These words warm my heart. These words tell me that what we are doing is working to broaden our proverbial tent. We're also working to include more research and researchers in our conference and membership where diversity is noted by topic, discipline, and method. Here I'm showing you conference papers by topic area, noting that this is just the 2nd year in which we've had a specific topic area for the causes and consequences of inequity in education, 8% of this year's conference papers. And I'm also showing conference papers by methods this year. While the far majority are quantitative, we do have 7% that use mixed methods and another 7% that are entirely qualitative. Step 3, seating the organization and relevant groups with committed individuals. We have, for the first time, created a board committee on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, JEDI, with inaugural chair Dominique Baker. We had a unanimous board vote to establish the committee, and the executive committee for the board are all members. We've also asked all of the other board committees to conceive of JEDI and their work and to report their JEDI activities. We are centering this work as an organization, and our members are stepping up in amazing ways. Here are just some of the leaders in this work, chairs of some of our relevant board committees and co-chairs of our community groups. Anjali Adukia has done a tremendous job fostering the community groups with dozens of hardworking, innovative community groups co-chairs, setting up programs and networking and Slack channels, things I don't even know anything about. Stephen Hemelt and Lydia Ross are working hard on early career mentoring, predoctoral diversity, and our P&P initiatives. These are just a few of the many people who are devoting time and energy to making AFP an inclusive, welcoming space. And now we're working on step 4, collecting the data, holding ourselves accountable, figuring out what's working and what's not, and where we need to go from here. This work is not easy, and if we're successful, it won't be easy. But isn't that the exact point? Many of us here this week are scholars and educators. Isn't it exactly our job to be curious, to want to learn new things, to want to answer questions that have plagued us, to solve problems? Isn't it our job to be out of our comfort zones, to be uncomfortable? We do it all the time. We start new research projects, we delve into a new literature or use a new method, we create partnerships between researchers and policymakers or practitioners so that we can tackle the tough questions, so that we can solve the problems that have seemed unsolvable. We continuously place ourselves at risk. And we're used to this kind of intellectual, pragmatic discomfort. What I'm advocating for is to allow ourselves to become uncomfortable in other ways, to purposely seek out the conversations and collaborations and engagement with others who think differently, approach problems differently, and who have lived differently. I'm so proud of AAFP. I'm proud of how we've gotten each other through the last 2 years, how we've strengthened existing bonds and created new ways to form community and support each other, and how we've continued to press on, using our skills to tackle policy problems and problems of policy and practice to help improve education, even as we ourselves are struggling and exhausted and existing in this disequilibrium. And I believe that by remaining a little bit uncomfortable, by choosing to live in the dissonance, this is how we will continue to be excellent and how we can live AEFP's mission to improve education policy so that all students have access to educational opportunities and are given the means to succeed in school and in their lives. And I know that you are up to the task. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. And most of all, thank you very much for being valued members of our growing and diversifying AFP community.